When I discovered Ninja Warrior, it was one of the only positive things I used to look forward to when I got home from school. I discovered it back in the good old summer of 2007, along with the other flagship shows on G-Force such as X-Play and Attack of the Show. But I had the most draw to Sasuke! I was hooked on the show like a drug as soon as I first saw it. It was my introduction to the eccentric culture of Japan. I never really knew of anything that came out of this island nation other than Pokemon or Digimon that I used to watch as a kid. So I was introduced to something of an alternate world watching all of these weird yet fascinating people from the show. I found it absolutely mesmerizing, and as a result it took over my 13-year-old mind. I felt like it had everything I would want from a good game show, like humor, drama, and a lot of athletic feats. I would turn it on every afternoon to watch the same reruns over and over again, even though it was in a language I could not even understand. I just found it so satisfying to watch and inspiring. It made me want to be more active. I even spent days making a map and mode for Halo 3 back in the summer of 2009. But also in 2009, G4 did something I originally thought was a great idea. They brought the show across the Pacific and started American Ninja Warrior. I have watched literally every single episode of the show, and I find it baffling. Baffling how two shows from the same idea turned into two completely different forms of entertainment. I still have an interest in the show, but I will be explaining in this video why I feel the original Japanese version is the superlative edition of the show and how the American version ruined everything I and many others liked about it. I know that you may have a completely different opinion than I do on some of the points that I will bring up about the show, and that is perfectly fine. As an asterisk, I haven't really been able to watch any new episodes of the Japanese edition since G4 was the only place to watch it, and unfortunately that channel was basically shut down back in early 2013. So my opinion only really relates to the episodes I have been able to see. Lastly, it is also important to understand that I am judging the American version as a juxtaposition with the Japanese version. I am not critiquing the American version alone. I believe the American version on its own is an okay show if you never watched the original, and I can see why it is successful. My reasoning for making these videos is because of the disappointment I have in it compared to the original, and how I believe that if it stayed closer to its roots, it could have been much better. A large reason I loved the Japanese version was that it had a great dichotomy of a wacky, quirky culture and a serious competition of people trying to do something that seemed almost impossible. There were so many different types of people that were competing. They could range from sumo wrestlers to comedians to chefs to narcissists to arts and crafts experts to actors, someone who does hang gliding, and even singers who actually perform at the start of their run. So many of them had different looks or did something special during their intro. Hell, I used to do the Makoto Nagano backslap in the gym years ago before doing certain exercises, and I doubt that I'm the only one that did. In fact, some people were so etched into the show, they were given their own nicknames like Mr. Octopus or Mr. Narcissist, because that's part of the character that they brought to the obstacle course. We knew that a lot of them would likely fail on the first couple of obstacles, but that was perfectly fine because it was all in good fun. This very important aspect made it much more than just making it to the top of Mount Midoriyama, and created a tradition of absolute bliss just to watch people compete on the course. Even when the odd lot of competitors fell, the audience and the loud rambunctious announcer would actually laugh and cheer for them in a way that didn't feel like it was in any way out of pity. It worked because many of the competitors tasked themselves in a comedic light, so there were really no hurt feelings from anyone. Mr. Octopus! And if they surprised the audience and actually hit the buzzer, everyone went insane. I actually smiled and laughed while re-watching the show, which is something I have never done with the American version. This showed that athletics weren't really the only thing that people could bring to the course. It felt like a truly joyful experience just to watch most of the tournament. Even the rambunctious announcer would make fun of the competitors in a usually lighthearted way, which is also something I never see in the American version. I am not going to say that I literally remember every competitor, but That was fine because there were so many of them to watch. The show discussed a little bit of every competitor's backstory while the person was competing or during their 10-second intro, which I had plenty of patience for. The intros were also not longer than the actual time people spent on the course, so I didn't feel like I was wasting any time to watch them. It was fine for me. They didn't need to flesh out every backstory because that wasn't the most important part of the show. The short video packages were left for the more serious competitors, but even then they were all very short. The reason they never went into much detail about this was because the true story was about the competitor and how they used their time on the course. Another important detail is that the people competing were just normal people looking to create a good time for everyone watching. They had lives outside of the show, which meant that they weren't likely to be these super athletic talents that we see on the American version. This gave an unpredictability to the show because you didn't know who was going to come out to hit the buzzer. Not everyone being shown off was a top rock climber, parkour expert, or a gymnast. They were usually just a bunch of underdogs trying to do something that seemed completely out of their league. All of these elements gave it a great combination of a fun game show and an intense sport. If I ever did the course, I wouldn't expect to make it to stage 3 or anything like that, but just the fact that these people also had a lot more in their lives outside of the competition made it feel more relatable, inclusive, and possible to me. The way American Ninja Warrior picks its competitors is almost entirely different from the original show. They focus a vast amount of time entirely on the backstories of the competitors. When you look at them, they usually have no visual appeal to them except for a few like Neil Craver, Jamie Ron, Rico Rivera, or Jesse Graff. But other than that, it's very rare to see someone who doesn't wear some basic sports gear or some merchandise that they sell online. Even when they have professional athletes or people from other professions perform on the course, they often don't bring any piece of equipment from their job to the course, which is a shame. The Japanese version did that, and I feel it helped differentiate them a lot. They also usually don't have anything special for their intros, which I believe are arguably one of the most important parts of the show. It allowed the audience to see what fun, interesting aspects of the competitors are being brought to the course, which sets them apart. The American competitors usually just wave to the audience, or if we are lucky, they do some sort of backflip. The only people who I've seen try to do something different are sometimes Lauren Ball, who can breakdance, and Jake Murray, who is probably the most entertaining one of the contestants since he at least tries to do something different every once in a while. I mean, I wish they would try anything at all for their intros, like Chris Wilczewski. He's brolic as hell. As a joke, just get him to rough up some kid for his lunch money. Or even Najee Richardson, who had a backstory on Ninja vs. Ninja about how he's a model, so get him to act like a smug prick and get someone to be a fake photographer and snap endless photos during his intro. Or even Kevin Bowl, let's say that he likes Breaking Bad, so let him put on a fake beard, a fedora, and some sunglasses, and when he has his intro, let him go up to the camera and say, "I am the one who knocks." I mean, literally anything. It would help a tremendous amount in giving some sort of personality other than an omnibenevolent inspiration, which the show has cliched to death with everyone. Have some fun with it. That's why this show would be perfect for professional wrestlers, because a lot of their intros really show off some sort of character about them, even without a backstory. You have the Usos who do a cultural dance at their entrance, or Shawn Michaels and Ric Flair who show their flamboyance, or Kane or The Undertaker who are just weird but entertaining. In fact, the Japanese version did have one professional wrestler, if you remember Hiroshi Tanahashi. But so did A&W, kind of, if you remember Zach Gowen, who was absolutely destroyed by Brock Lesnar. A&W rarely have weird people that I like, for example Eddie Stewart or that guy that eats bugs, but even when they have these people on, they are over-explained with backstories like everyone else. Or better yet, they are thrown into short clips because the NBC gods decided that they weren't worthy of being shown, which all leads to another colossal gripe that I have. The lovable oddballs that have been so etched into the show have been so highly replaced with people who have dramatic personal backstories that are going through very difficult situations. There is pretty much two categories of competitors that appear on the show, but they intersect quite often. One of these groups are those who are fighting life-threatening illnesses and are running for their disease, for a loved one with the disease, or have any melancholy story to tell to be on the show. I feel like an awful person for complaining about it, but I either just don't really care about the stories or I just find them too depressing to sit through, since a lot of these competitors are going through a living hell. One reason I feel it's obviously done is because, like I said earlier, there is little differentiation differentiation between the competitors, so this is how they try to fix that. And personally, I believe the whole idea behind it is kind of stupid because usually they have nothing to do with the course, and these video packages they have take up such a large portion of the show. They spend around 1 to sometimes even 4 minutes on the backstories of these people who are being quoted on the show for their issues with drug abuse, to neuroblastoma, to having friends or family with life-threatening illnesses, to Parkinson's, or going through a divorce, to the biggest horror of all, being a woman. I mean, sometimes I feel like they should just change the logo on their t-shirts from this to this. I feel like the show took the blueprint from another popular NBC show called America's Got Talent, which is basically another competition about whose life is worse, but this time the winner gets $1 million and is given a show in Las Vegas. It's also a talent show. This is also how I feel about American Ninja Warrior sometimes. It also has an obstacle course. I believe A&W does this to try to inspire people, but I either get more annoyed or depressed by it instead, so it reduces my interest in the show. It's not why I and many others watch it. I'm not going to show any of the people who are going through these problems out of respect for them, but I remember last season there was a person that had cancer in remission, and right before the competition, the cancer came back. Like, how in the world is this supposed to be inspiring me? They usually just fall in the water after a few obstacles and need to go back to their lives. There was no development of many of these people because they are not usually seen more than once on the show. They usually fall early, and to be blunt, it's just an obstacle course, so I can't see how people develop from this. At some point, it's like they think I get an adrenaline rush out of this. It's not like I'm thinking, wow, I gotta see the next episode and see what the next person's being killed by, ha ha ha! At least on America's Got Talent, the acts with depressing stories can move on to successful careers because they do usually have a talent that can be monetized. You can see them and their talents develop more since you'll be seeing them more than once as they are going through the competition. I don't hate these people or want to trivialize their problems in the slightest. I am also not saying that these people should not be allowed to be on the show. I believe it's perfectly fine to include them. I'm just asking by how they are promoted. At what point are they being invited on the show, not because of the enjoyment that they can bring to the course, but instead just having us know them by their problems outside of it. I mean, if I want to be on the show, do I need to start slamming my head into the floor until I get some sort of disability and can compete in a wheelchair? Because I'll do it. The other group that the show focuses on even more often is the super competitors, who also have dramatic stories. This is where I most likely will be at a disagreement with many viewers, because I feel an issue with the show is that the top competitors are too qualified. I can completely understand if you think that the show is better because you like to see great athletes compete. The work ethic of the competitors does create some great athletes you wouldn't expect from Sasuke, such as the female athletes. However, it kind of kills the inspiration for me, a normal person with somewhat of an athletic build, to compete. Many of the top competitors seem to have the entire focus of their lives seemingly dedicated entirely around this show. When we look at the culture of the Japanese Ninja Warrior, they did train a lot, obviously, but culturally they had careers outside of the competition, and many of the other competitors on it didn't really take it too seriously. That's why it was a great combination of fun comedic aspects and tragedy that many great shows usually have. This is why the American version is hard for me to get behind. It is always serious for serious competitors and for people who usually have serious backstories. For example, let's take Eddie Stewart, someone who was shown in a lighthearted way, and see how he was treated after he fell.
Oh, hold on. He's spinning, he's in trouble.
As you can see, even though he was shown in a lighthearted way, it's not really lighthearted when people fall, which sucks because most people do fall. There was just no pure bliss on the show like they did in the original, where people were just happy to compete. From what I saw of Sasuke, it was rare for the competitors to actually spend their lives entirely around the show. The only person who I actually saw quit his job to make the competition his main concern was Katsumi Yamada. The issue I have with all of this is that it creates an athletic gap between the top and the bottom competitors, because most people who aren't ill and can't afford to make this show their life would have an issue being featured on the show. You might say that there are some people that get past the first few obstacles yet fall and don't make it through, that don't seem sick or like super athletes. The issue with this is that the first 4/5 of the season are specifically designed to get rid of any fragment of a normal kind of person before getting to the actual course in Vegas. This means before the actual competition starts, all the regular people are gone and all you are left with are super athletes, which gets rid of any real relatability or surprise factor for the show because they are all top competitors. It's actually kind of embarrassing when the announcers try to hype up the shock value of some competitors who are obviously very well fit for the course.
She's got a background in gymnastics and track, and she's got the right background for Ninja. She did both gymnastics and track in college. She earned All-American honors for gymnastics at Springfield College in Massachusetts. That gymnastics background should help her here on the double twister. She's been training a lot with her boyfriend Joe, going to the Ninja Gym 3 or 4 times a week. At Springfield College, she was a national champion on the balance beam. She's got this. Make the swing to the second cylinder. Uh-oh, her hands are slipping. She's got to get a big hug on it. Big hug. Go for it. Go for it. Ooh! Where'd she come from? Be the first female to get through this. Are you kidding me? Oh, my. This is why this sport is so great. Always unpredictable.
Look at any of the top competitors and look at their professions and especially their social media. You will see that most of the popular athletes have their jobs or time usually, but not always, rely around being basically full-time ninjas, gym owners, trainers, athletes, or stunt doubles, which already require a lot of physical exercise that are needed for the course. They are athletes inside and outside of the course. And many of them get these similar jobs because of the fame that the course gives them. There are plenty of videos online where you can see them even holding their own events like the Wolfpack Ninja Tour, where the gigantic community of competitors are holding their own competitions. This just kills the grassroots I liked of the original. Of course, there are those that break this trend like Joe Moravsky, who is a weatherman, and Alyssa Beard, who is a teacher, or Jeff Britton, who operates TV cameras for sports broadcasting. But still, a large amount of these top competitors have a clear advantage over anyone else because they have jobs that actually require training, or, as according to the editor-in-chief of American Ninja Warrior Nation, have dedicated their lives to this, trained for years, given up their day jobs. And this is something I really want to make clear. I'm not trying to say that these people should not be allowed to run on the course, but I do feel that this is another major reason why I personally enjoy the Japanese version more. Do I think that every person should have an athletic body? No. Do I think that many of them should have somewhat of an athletic ability? Yes. But I don't think that nearly all of the competitors that are featured should be picked based on their backstories or by being top-ranked gymnasts, rock climbers, parkour runners, or other record-breaking college athletes who make this competition their main drive in life, which the show seems to focus on a lot. And to me, this kind of cheapens the meaning of trying to make the show about how any random person can be a ninja. I was completely, utterly disappointed with the show about how much of a facade it is when one of the producers said in an interview with Variety magazine about how much people never get tired of seeing ordinary people, both men and women alike, do extraordinary things. I would like to show a clip of what the commentator said about Joe Moravsky the season after he started because I feel like it is a superlative example of what I don't like.
Many cities will often have the local news people come out kind of as a novelty act, and quite honestly, when the weatherman came out, we thought that's what he was. Nothing more than a novelty act, but quickly we realized this guy was a serious competitor.
They basically said that Joe Moravsky, a normal-looking person who has a normal job being a weatherman at a local TV station, was thought of as a novelty act when he first started. Like, how is being a weatherman at a local TV station a novelty act? The guy isn't anyone famous like Al Roker. What seemed like a novelty act in Sasuke were the Olympic competitors, and these were people who had dedicated their lives to athletics. With the show in Japan, or even the first couple of seasons on American Ninja Warrior when the show wasn't mainstream, all of the top competitors had normal jobs outside of the show. Even Drew Dreshel, the guy who's probably the most dedicated person to Ninja Warrior as a whole, had a job as a car dealer. This gave a feel that the course still looked at least somewhat achievable for an average Joe to compete on without making it their full-time job. When I watched Sasuke, many of the top competitors were athletic, obviously, but they weren't really athletes that had an athletic profession. The competitors used to have their own ways of training for the course, which also gave a uniqueness and underdog look to everyone. Whether it was Makoto Nagano, who trained while he was on his boat 300 days a year, or Shingo Yamamoto, who trained at the gas station he was managing. Or even the first few seasons of A&W with David Campbell making his own course in a backyard. This added to the culture of the show by finding your own ways of doing things. It was like a Rocky montage where he was punching meat in the freezer, which was absurd, but it was likable. It looked more grassroots, which in turn made it look so much more relatable because not everyone had to go to a ninja or rock climbing gym, which makes everyone look so damn banal. I honestly can't think of more than a dozen competitors in my head over the 15 years of episodes I have watched of the show that were true all-stars, because they weren't really athletes outside of the show. I mean, Yusuke Morimoto, who won in Sasuke 31, didn't even compete in the next season because he was busy with school and work. The only real recurring athlete I remember that had a clear advantage on this version was Shinsuke Nagasaki, who was an Olympic-worthy gymnast like Najee Richardson. But other than that, it was rare to see that type of competitor. The American version feels like it's completely filled with these all-star competitors. Every season you see college record-breaking athletes. I know I said earlier I likely wouldn't do well if I tried the Japanese version, but at least it felt more possible than this competition. The US course is mainly designed to include this more super athletic group of competitors. Ninja Warrior wasn't just about the deeply personal triumph of pushing yourself like the editor-in-chief of American Ninja Warrior Nation says, but was more like a call to action. It felt like twice a year the best of a culture would come together to celebrate something grand. Every competitor comes for a special event and needs to bring something unique about themselves, whether it is an athleticism or other fun elements about themselves. It felt like all were important. They did their thing, and if they hit the buzzer, everyone was ecstatic. If they fell, everyone felt for them, but no matter what, they were still celebrated because all of them succeeded in doing their part. It didn't feel like there were any true losers. It seemed like everyone was needed for the show to be successful. We need our clown, our professional wrestlers, our singers, comedians, fishermen, our 60-year-old guy with an octopus in his hands. We need our best that represent us, and that is exactly who came. The only thing they would need is Hideo Kojima, and it would be the greatest show ever made. It wasn't even just Japanese people that could participate. Everyone was allowed to run the course no matter where they came from. It was all just a quick couple of hours with fun and tension that, very importantly, didn't try to carry all of the world's problems on its shoulders, and also left me wanting more. It was a truly feel-good show. This is weird though, because Japan is one of the most non-diverse countries in the world, yet their competitors were so completely different from each other. And yet we live in the most diverse nation on the planet, but we have the same trite people competing all the time. Now that is ironic. Thank you for taking the time to watch my video. It is my first time creating a video, so I would really appreciate it if you could tell me what you think about it, because I know that there's a lot I need to learn in regards to editing. And lastly, if you did enjoy the video, it would be awesome if you gave me a subscribe. Have a nice day.